It's time now for the World Cup debrief with Emily Boyle. Hello to you, Emily.
Hello.
We made it. We're through the group stages.
We're through the group stages. 72 games have been played. And to debrief the last of those games, Tando Sevilla joins us on set. But before we come to you for your expert opinions, let's have a look at the last of those group stage games. Let's start with Group J. Those games finished earlier this morning, and Austria and Algeria's qualification was a pretty close run thing. It was 2-2 as the game went into additional time, and then came Riyad Mahrez, who scored his second goal of the game and his second goal ever at a World Cup. Austria were then technically eliminated for a whole 3 minutes, but luckily for the Austrians, Kalajic headed the ball into the Algerian net in the 96th minute. The game ended at 3-3, meaning that both teams are through to the next round. A stressful game for all involved. Take a listen.
It was a nightmare for like a couple of minutes. It was a literal nightmare. But in the end, we were happy. We wanted to beat them, but the draw is okay.
Up to the last minute, I mean, when the goal, from Algeria came like the 3-2, we are like, oh my goodness. And then Austria just, hit it, didn't they?
It was crazy. Definitely a roller coaster of emotions. When we were losing, next second we're tied, next second we're winning, and then in the last second they score. I mean, it was crazy. Honestly, best case scenario for all of us.
Well, that was a very crazy game indeed. But sadly, that means that last-minute drama basically eliminated Iran. They are missing out on a spot within the 8 best third-place teams. Their World Cup journey has been pretty rough off the pitch, but also on the pitch. Over the course of the competition, they had 3 goals disallowed by VAR, including a goal which would have qualified them disallowed for being offside by the tiniest of margins. Elsewhere in Group J, World Cup first-timers Jordan were up against reigning champions Argentina, and Argentina treated us to a dead ball festival. Giovanni Lo Celso opened the scoring with a beautiful free kick from outside the box, and Argentina doubled down thanks to a penalty 10 minutes later. Jordan scored their second World Cup goal ever thanks to the Jordanian Messi Al-Tamari. Unfortunately for Jordan, all hope was lost when the real Messi came off the bench, only to score a free kick a few minutes later. He's now scored in every single one of his last 7 World Cup games. Absolutely crazy performance. Well, Tando, let me come to you on this one. Messi, crucial to Argentina's game on the pitch, but also off the pitch. Will he be guiding them to another win at this World Cup?
I mean, just having his presence over there, you look at the visuals, the supporters, like cameras glaring and everything. He's become some kind of for lack of a better word, a football god. And I do think that his impact is felt. I mean, even just sharing a locker room with Messi, the way that he speaks, looking at the build-up to the final in 2022, there's a video of them in the locker room, and he has them huddled up, and he's explaining that we've been away from our families for like 2 months. This guy his kid has been born, he wasn't there. This guy hasn't seen his family, this and this has happened. So it's the mindset as well. He makes references to God and everything. So he's a leader. He knows how to marshal the guys, get into the mindset. The whole time I've been speaking about the psychological component of being in a tournament, a world stage tournament. And I do think that when you're uncertain about yourself, the opposition, you need a player like Messi, whether he's on the pitch or off it. Even just knowing that he's here, I think even for the coach, just having his presence around is really impactful. So I do think that he's quite integral for this side, and he knows it, and he steps up when necessary.
Supreme confidence from the GOAT. Meanwhile, celebrations are due for the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Yes, they absolutely had to win their game against Uzbekistan if they were going to move through to the next round. But an early goal by Uzbekistan's Shomurodov spoiled their fun, and rather painfully for DRC fans, the Leopards had to wait until a 68th minute penalty to get themselves back into the game. 2 more goals then followed for them, first from Mayele in the 78th, and then again from Yoann Wissa, who scored in the last few minutes of additional time. That 3-1 win means that they are through to the knockouts for the first time in their history, and that's 52 years after their last and first World Cup appearance. Now, Tando, let's take a moment to talk about the DRC, but also African teams in general. They've had an absolutely brilliant World Cup so far. 9 out of the 10 African teams playing have made it through to the round of 32. What does this tell us about African football, and what does it mean for African teams going forward in World Cups?
The standard is rising. Yesterday's price is not today's price, and I do think that it's very beautiful to watch. It's also not something new. I mean, when you look at the days of Samuel Eto'o, what Cameroon was, with the half jerseys, with no arms, no sleeves, that's like the memorable moment or the memorable period. So it's not new that African teams can perform well in the World Cup. You look at the times of the eras of Yaya Touré. So it's not new, Didier Drogba. You know, I just think that this time around, it's not individual great performance. It's more African teams, more presence. The theme of this whole World Cup has been the dual citizenship and what that does. Also, the rules that FIFA has introduced, that once you've actually pledged your allegiance and you have been fielded and you've played in a game that's not a friendly match, that's it. You stick to that side. So I do think that there has been some kind of strategy. I don't think it's been intentional, that a lot of players are born in countries like France, England, and so on, and they rise through the development structures, and then they choose, because also England, France, it's very saturated in those youth structures and the national selection structures. And so you do have players who then decide to go and pledge their allegiance back at home. I mean, you see with the Doué brothers, actually. You have Désiré, who's chosen France, and then you have Gela Doué, who's chosen Ivory Coast. He's been selected in the starting selection, and he's actually becoming more regular in the starting sides for Ivory Coast. So you do see that we're able to extract from the training and the structural sides and bring it back to the continent with the expertise, perhaps not even growing in international structures. You look at a team like South Africa, where close to 95% of the team born domestically, plays domestically as well. So there is some kind of a football revolution that's taking place, but I do think it was bound to happen eventually, because now there's resources, now there's movement. Because prior to these times, okay, we'll expand on it another time, but I do think that I am quite chuffed. And also speaking to DRC, Johan Wissa has been really crucial for this side, but also Mbasi, the goalkeeper, he made some really critical saves yesterday, and it's a marvel to watch, and I really hope they make it further in the tournament.
Yeah, well, we'll be keeping an eye on those African sides, of course. Meanwhile, Portugal missed out on the top spot in Group K, held back by a quite impressive Colombia. That ended in a 0-0 draw, of course, but both of those teams go through to the next round.
And meanwhile, England took the top spot yesterday in Group L.
Yes, they also got going quite late in the game, as we saw in other fixtures, but Jude Bellingham finally found the back of the net from a Bukayo Saka corner in the 62nd. He was joined on the scoreboard by none other than Harry Kane. It was the England captain's 11th World Cup goal, meaning he becomes the Three Lions record World Cup scorer, edging past Gary Lineker on 10. England therefore stayed on top of their group and will be facing the DRC in the next round. Now, Croatia, meanwhile, finished second of the group, winning their fixture against Ghana 2-1. The Black Stars don't need to worry too much, though, because they are also through as one of the best third-place teams. Unfortunately for Panama, they go home with 0 points and 0 goals.
So what can we take away from these group stage games?
Well, the big question is, what does this 48-team format look like in stats? 72 matches, 215 goals. The new 48 World Cup format has just shattered an all-time scoring record, and we haven't even left the group stage. That's an average of 3 goals a match. The old record stood at 172 goals for an entire tournament that was set in Qatar in 2022. But here's the catch, though. That record took 64 games, and we've already played 72, just getting out of the group stage. This format is basically an offensive showcase. Tunisia and Iraq have the worst defences, conceding 12 goals each, and Spain and Mexico, they're the only two teams that haven't conceded a single goal yet. Germany, France and Netherlands are your top scoring nations with 10 goals apiece, and the superstars, of course, delivering on their promises. Messi leads everyone with 6 goals, and right behind him, tied with 4 each, Mbappe, Dembele, Haaland and Vinicius Jr.
And that wraps up the group stage. So we know all the matchups for the round of 16.
Yes, and huge fixtures await us to come. So great for all the football fans out there. Let's start looking at this bracket. Starting on the left of the bracket. Great games there as well. France against Sweden, Netherlands up against Morocco, and Belgium face Senegal. On the right of the bracket, we'll be treated to Brazil against Japan, Ivory Coast against Norway, or even England against DRC. Argentina, meanwhile, don't face really tough opposition until the semi-finals. but of course there's still room for an upset. That's the other half of the table you can see there. Still room for an upset. I'm hoping that Switzerland gets a few in. They face Argentina if everything goes well in the semi-finals. Who knows? We can always dream, but we'll have to wait and see how those turn out.
Yes, we will. And the round of 32 kicks off this evening as co-host Canada are actually playing an away game. It's going to Los Angeles to face South Africa.
Yeah, their loss against Switzerland, incidentally, means that they're heading to Los Angeles to face off with South Africa. That all kicks off at 9 p.m. Paris time. But I'm sure that Tando will be in front of that game as a Bafana fan. Of course, neither country has played in a knockout stage of the World Cup before. Canada hadn't even won a game before this tournament, so the stakes are pretty high for both sides. Now, Tando, we were talking about Bafana yesterday, and you were saying that you've seen the confidence in this team progress over time. What will they look like in this game this evening?
That's a big question, because in the previous game against South Korea, they were without a very key integral player, and that is in midfielder Teboho Mokoena. And I do think that there are a lot of changes that can be made in the formation. Perhaps not that much, but I think a point of focus here is the central defense of the South African side. You have Ocon and Begezeli Mbugazi, who, according to statistics so far after the first round, is the strongest central defender in the World Cup right now. He's incredible. He popped a ball in the last game against Czechia, if I'm not mistaken. He's got legs of steel. His passing is always accurate, whether he's doing the volleys. In duels, he's exceptional. He's very clean and disciplined as well. He hasn't registered a yellow since the beginning of the tournament, but he wins most of his duels. He's very useful. He moves up front when necessary to play in the attacking position. And I do think that a transitional player like that who's able to read the game as well as he can is really useful. I do think that also seeing how Coach Hugo Broos has changed the tactics from a very defensive start against Mexico, which saw us saw South Africa walk away with 2 goals from the opposition, no goals for themselves, 2 red cards as well, a 3-match ban as well for a very integral player, leader in Themba Zwane. I do think that the start was very unpleasant, but with time you could see that they could find their feet. And a lot of the presses, he speaks a lot about the confidence that he's had to instill in the players. He's got a young side. Like I mentioned, most of the players are based domestically. And so I do think that the shock of playing internationally and dealing with time zones, the logistics of everything. So there's so much that comes to play when you speak about the mindset and the preparation for a game as important as this. Well, you mentioned that it's an away game for hosts, which is like really strange, but I guess that's what happens when you have 3 host countries. Canada, they're used to logistics. You understand LA is just around the corner. Some of the players perhaps themselves play over there. And so for South Africa, when you watch the press conferences and you hear Hugo Broos speaking about the logistics that they have to deal with. I mean, they were in Monterrey after South Korea. They had to go back to another place, to their camp, to then gather their things and then go to LA. When do you factor in rest and recovery? When do you factor in conditioning? When do you start then training again and preparing for the fixture? So I do think that some teams are dealing with a lot bigger setbacks than others, but I don't think that it's useful as an excuse. But I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what's going to happen in the midfield for the South African side coming into this encounter. But I also think there's kind of a couple of question marks for Canada as well. Alphonso Davies still hasn't started, the captain. Vice captain
back this evening.
Exactly. So I do think that that might make a change, apply a little bit of pressure. Hugo Broos is aware of the opponent, but you can't necessarily be fully aware of the opponent that you're dealing with if you're not dealing with the entire squad in its entirety. I do think that also with the expanded format and the structure, there are mind games, tactics in this whole thing, and not just on-field tactics. Teams are now looking at not making it to number 2 of the group stages because they want to stay in a certain city, or they are going to be fielding certain players and operating a certain way. So I do think that, yes, we might be dealing with injuries with the likes of Alphonso Davies, Steph Eustachio as well, who is the vice captain, who also missed the last game. So I do think that based on a muscle tightness. So I do think that these are things that factor in, but we don't know if these are really valid, you know.
Well, what about, if we talk about Canada, will the fact that they play in Los Angeles be an advantage to them or a disadvantage? Because it could be releasing them from pressure, but it could also mean that they're without their home support. Do you have any very brief thoughts on that?
I mean, if we're speaking about home support, you watch a game like DRC last night. they're coming all the way from South Central Africa, and they're in numbers. So if we're asking about support for Canada, I do think that it's not too far for the Canadians to travel, and even some of the team USA can just switch allegiances to support for Canada. So I do think that they are okay when we speak about support. I just think internally in the camp, they just have to build the support from inside and not drop the game. So I think prior to this, I was observing tactics and some of the teams who use a mid block and a low block. So now, which is the transitioning towards counter pressing. And so South Africa doesn't play the most compact game. So I do think that this is something that the Canadians can capitalize on, which we've seen in the previous games. They capitalize on the opposition's mistakes. So I definitely will be looking out for that one, but I really hope the boys can make it a little bit farther.
Exciting games ahead. Fingers crossed for Bafana Bafana.
Yeah, big
Yes,
time.
yes. We'll see how it goes this evening. Thank you very much, Emily. Thank you very much, Tando.
Thank you.
That's it for the World Cup debrief. Please stay tuned to France 24.